I know we're live.
I've done, Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, okay. Welcome to our Trust Board meeting in January 2022, the first of the new year. It's good to see everybody. Happy New Year to those of you that have not said Happy New Year to yet. And welcome to our senior managers that have logged in to join the meeting. Remember that if you want to ask any questions during the meeting, because it is via Teams, to use the raise your hand function and not to use the chat box. It's not appropriate during the board meeting. Senior managers who wish to ask questions will have an opportunity during the meeting when I come to that part of the agenda. And if you have any questions, please do raise your hand or make it known that you've got a question for us during the meeting. The meeting is recorded and will be published on the website tomorrow. So that's great. Very quick turnaround. So thanks very much, Mel. Just to welcome to the meeting Mark Farmer, who's joined us as a member of the Next Director Scheme. You're very welcome, Mark. Hope you enjoy the meeting. I don't think I've got any other welcomes to say. Have we got any apologies? I don't think we have we?
No apologies.
Great.
I've received no apologies, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Karen. Any declarations of interest? No? Fantastic. And we've got the minutes from the previous meeting, which was in November. They've been circulated. Can we take them for accuracy first, please? Anybody noted any inaccuracies in the minutes? No. Can I take it then that they're accurate and we can approve them? Somebody nod. Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you. The Matters Arising Action Log. I think this is the first time that I've been at EMAS. So it's 11 years that we've had no actions to carry forward. Is that right?
New year as well. So
a new year as well and a new start. That's fantastic. So we've got no actions to carry forward, which is super. So just on that point, has anybody any concerns about the actions that have been closed? No, great, super. We've had no questions from the public notified, have we, Karen?
That's correct. We received no questions.
Okay, thank you. So this is an opportunity now. If any of our senior leaders attending the meeting would like to pose a question on any items that are on the agenda, now's your opportunity to do that. By raising your hand or at least letting us know that you've got a question. Rebecca's having a quick look. Are you, Rebecca? I can't see any.
No, I can't see any either.
Okay. Thank you very much. We'll move straight on then to the Chief Exec's report. And because this is deliberately a concise meeting, Richard, so that we're not keeping people too long because of operational pressures, we take it as read. Actually, this is the same to all the authors of the papers. Take it as read that we've read the paper. There's no need to go through it in detail, just pull out any key points.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much, Pauline, and good morning, everybody. What I will do, as Pauline just described, take the paper as read, therefore in a few moments I'm going to hand over to Ben Holdaway, who will give an update from an operations perspective of the current position. But if I may, I'm just going to take this opportunity just to personally say thank you to everybody, Pauline, across the whole of the organisation. This, we know, has been an absolutely phenomenally challenging time, very, very challenging time. Everybody has been under immense pressure now for a significant period of time, and there's been no surprise with the latest variant through the Christmas, the New Year period. The ambulance service and the broader NHS has been under huge pressure. And my special thanks to all of our colleagues who worked throughout that period, all of the managers and the leaders who were providing the appropriate support, and everybody, including our amazing network of volunteers who gave a huge amount of hours to contribute towards patient care. We know it's been very difficult, and we know that there are some huge challenges ahead of us. But I am confident with some of the actions that we're doing, we'll continue to see some improvements in the care that we're providing and the timeliness and the responsiveness that it takes us to get to our patients. So I'm going to pause at that point, and I'm going to bring in Ben. I'm assuming, Ben, you are there?
I am indeed. Morning, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Morning, Ben.
Morning. I'll take any questions on the Chief Executive report, but I'll just give an update on the full month of December, where we ended up, and just little bits on the start of January as well as we move through. I'll do as usual. I'll go through the different pillars that underpin our service delivery. Everyone should be familiar with those by now. So I'll start with activity. What we're seeing with activities since November is continued. So our response activities are actually running below plan. It was around 5% below plan. However, incidence is still significantly above. So in December, we had about 315 on average per day more incidents. What that didn't transpire to is responses. So we were dealing with those in different ways, either through hear and treat or through our demand management routes. And calls, likewise, calls is around 10% up on previous year. That equates to, in December, we took around 20,000 more 999 calls than we did the year before, 650 a day. Our average pickup for December was 14 seconds. So it was an improving position during December, and that's because our recruitment plan, as we brought in 30 additional call takers from from August until December, that all came in on time, which meant we could offer a much better call pickup. We didn't quite know what type of New Year's we were going to get this year, whether we were going to get a traditional one where we were really busy, or whether subsequent lockdowns had changed people's appetite to New Year's. Well, we found out we've gone back to the traditional New Year. At peak, we were taking a call around every 15 seconds for the first 4 hours of the morning. But again, we handled those calls really well. Even with the MSD, which I'll come on to shortly, we still managed to get over 35 at peak, 40 call takers on duty to help us manage that demand. So the call taker position is much improved, and that's continued in January. We're currently around a 5-second mean pickup for call taking, and our 2-minute delays now are in the tens rather than the hundreds that they were earlier on. So last week we only had 14 2-minute delays, which is excellent. Acuity still is high, so 14% category 1, 67% cat 2 in December. Last year, Cat 1 was around 10% and 63% Cat 2, so we've continued to see that rise in acuity. Moving on to resource, December we put just over 140,000 DC hours and 22,000 FRV hours. This is less than December 2020 and marginally lower than in the activity plan. The reason for that is abstractions. MSD, as Richard alluded to this in his intro. On New Year's Eve, we had 405 operational colleagues across either Ops, PTS or EOC stood down for varying COVID reasons. And on top of that, we had our general sickness, which was around 280 at that point. A huge abstraction to deal with during the busiest point of the year. Overtime uptake has picked up actually, as we've seen gone through December, and more or less at the same levels as we were seeing last year. So it's been a slower uptake this year, but we have started to see people take the uptake in overtime. Hospital delays. So in December we lost 11,500 hours to handovers over 15 minutes. That's about 370 hours per day. However, the month was in the middle of the month, for about 10 days in the month, we saw our handover delays drop significantly to about half. So for the first half of the month, we were actually losing about 450, 500 hours a day. So the average across the whole month was skewed slightly by the middle 10 days, where everything got a lot better and there was a lot much better flow. But that then soon returned back to what we're seeing, sort of 500 hours between the Christmas and New Year period. And as we've moved into January, unfortunately, that's continued. And last week, we had some of our worst days that we've ever had. So on 2 days last week, we lost over 700 hours to hospital delays, over 15 minutes. And the same trend has continued as reported all the way through the year. This is despite taking fewer people to hospital. So there was, I think, it's around 2,000 fewer attendances in December this year than there was last year. That hospital delays and non-conveyance, again, non-conveyance seems to now be pretty static and in a much improved position. So non-conveyance for December was 55% compared to 57% the year before. Hearing treat was 11.8%, seeing treat 33%, and the remainder 55% to hospital, of which under 50% went to an ED front door, and only 49.8% went to a front door. The remainder went to other areas. So that all led to a December end position of performance of just under 9 minutes Cat 1 and just over 16 minutes on the 90th, 55 minutes Cat 2 mean and 2 hours on the 90th, and Cat 3 2 hours 55 on the mean and 7.5 hours on the 90th. So not, way out of the national standards and a position that none of us were comfortable with, but put all the mitigations in place to manage that as best we can. I guess the good news is January started better. So our category 2 mean, for example, is currently running 10 minutes better than we were in December, and the 90th is 25 minutes better. And on Cat 3, we're an hour and a half better on nearly 2 hours better on the Cat 3 90th as well. So just before I close, I just update board on one action that we've been working on over the last week and will come into play tomorrow. We engaged with the military last week, put a MACA request in last week, and 7 days later they will be joining us, start training tomorrow. We're having 60 general duty staff join us. Our plan is to use them on low acuity work, teamed up with one of our urgent care teams, and to help us support us with the low acuity work. Therefore, we can free up our resource for the high acuity work. Initially, they'll join us until the end of, we've got them to the end of March, but there'll be a mid-review in February to see whether we will continue that with the military. We have also got the option to bring a further amount of military in, should we need to, should things escalate any further. But at this moment, we're going for 60, and they'll be spread across all our divisions and working in various stations across. We launch that will go out to all our staff today via e-news, and then all the stakeholder comms will go out thereafter this afternoon as well. First time we've done this, so it's new to all of us. Certainly a new experience for me working with the military last week to get us to this position. But yet again, I think Kerry's team pulled out all the stops to put a training programme together in a week, which is brilliant. And the ops teams have worked really hard to make sure that they are crewed up and ready to go next week when they're live. So I'll pause there, Pauline, and happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Ben. Richard, do you want to come in first?
So thanks, Ben. Thanks for the update. I think just in relation to the military support that the trust is going to be receiving, I think we just need to be very clear that this is not a decision that we take lightly. This is reflective of the fact of the whole of the health system within our region has been very challenged and constrained now for a significant period of time. And the one thing that really impacts upon us, and as you've quite rightly just described, Ben, is around the excessive handover delays at hospitals, where we know many patients have been waiting for hours and hours to be handed over into the receiving units, and that's not a criticism of that hospital, that's just reflective of the pressures that they face. Having said that, what we then experience, we know the resulting impact of that is we can't get to our patients in the community as quickly as we would like to, and some patients are waiting unacceptably long amounts of time, and those lower acuity patients have to be deprioritised over the life-threatening calls, and therefore the reason that why we've had to take this additional action is to make sure that we can get to those lower acuity patients in a timely manner, because they're the ones that quite rightly we remain concerned about. So as Ben has quite rightly described, this is not a decision that we have taken lightly, but we are confident with some additional capacity into the organisation, very similar to what we did with fire and rescue colleagues who worked with us now for a significant amount of time and put a huge amount of hours into the front end of operations around urgent care, and that we've been hugely appreciative of and will continue to use as well. So it's just a little bit of additional context
Richard.
behind that.
Just to be clear, Richard, so how long's the training? They start training on Wednesday. How long's the training, Ben?
So it's 2 days training and then a further day vehicle familiarisation.
Okay, so 3 days really.
3 days, yeah.
And will they be working with the urgent care crews? Is that the plan?
Predominantly, however, we've almost got an escalation. So if we haven't got people from the work with on urgent care, we will then put them with an ECA or a technician, but they will still work on HCP type workload. The military have been clear is that they want us to focus on that work first, which we do as well, as Richard described.
Yeah.
But then we might review that over the coming weeks, because if we're not utilising them as much as we can, we will then look to how we can use them more with our workload. But
they're not paramedics.
No.
Have they got any medical training?
No.
Okay.
No, the general duties are military staff, and they won't just come from the army, they'll come from Navy, you name it, they're coming,
Across the board. Thank you.
Across the board, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got 3 people with their hands up for questions. Gary, VJ, and 4. Sorry, Gary, VJ, Leon, and Perminda.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Ben. And I mean, first of all, I think phenomenal effort by the teams across the Christmas period in terms of the effort they put out. But my question is around that response and relating to COVID in the main. I mean, I can see in the chief executive's paper there's been a number of COVID outbreaks, 8 COVID outbreaks, but I also see that we've got a fall in compliance with distancing between people. I wonder whether there's any correlation in the stations where we've had the outbreaks with their compliance. As a first question, and my second question then was just some reassurance around the vaccination program, especially around boosters. Given we've got the 1st of April deadline coming towards us, which is the mandatory kind of vaccination point for staff or leave the NHS pretty much, if that goes ahead. I wonder whether we have any concerns with that, or whether we feel quite comfortable with our level of vaccination.
So I think Nicola is going to give us an update shortly on the outbreak situation. So I don't know if you want to hold that pause for that point. And Kerry, I don't know if you just want to come in on our programme of work around the 1st of April, leading us towards the 1st of April.
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. I think first of all, if I can just give some assurance on the boosters, we're currently 70.61% of our staff have had their booster vaccination, and we continue to monitor that on a weekly basis and report that to the executive team. The booster vaccination is not part of the mandatory COVID vaccine as a condition of deployment. It is your first 2 vaccinations. So I will give a full update to the Trust Board in the confidential session of the current status of the project around the mandatory vaccination programme. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Okay, thanks very much. VJ.
Thank you, Chairman. So I've got a couple of questions, Ben. Thank you very much for the update. When critical incidents are declared by CUTES in our patch, what direct impact does that have on our staff and the length of time they might have to wait? So how does that impact on the operation? That's the first one. The second question is, given the amount of pressure, how do you monitor the staff health and well-being? And I mean across the piece, not just the front line, but people who are in enabling services as well. And with regard to the army, it seemed to me that it had been rolled out in other areas, sort of, December time. Were we late coming to this, or was the offer not there when it was happening in other areas?
No. So I'll start with the military question. No, I don't think we were late coming to the party. It's always been in our thoughts. It's always been in our plans. In fact, we came very, very close in the summer to pushing forward with the MACA request. We decided at that point we didn't need to because things steadied off a little bit. So during December, David and I were talking regularly about the plan, and we started to talk to the region about whether we were going to go down this route. And then it just sort of as we saw things escalating, we talked more to the region, and at that time there was talk more of a system-wide request, health request, and then it sort of then played out to being an ambulance request between ourselves and West Midlands. So no, we weren't late coming to the party. I think it was always in our planning. We just tried to find the right time to do it. I think your first question around critical incident, I think the impact plays most in that we have longer delays waiting to hand patients over. Therefore, we hold more patients in the community, so the pressure on our overall workload is high. In terms of what actions we have to directly take when a trust or a system declares a critical incident, there's no direct actions for us to take other than we have to then partake in any of the strategic coordination groups or tactical coordination groups. We become members of those groups, and the divisional teams have to join those meetings, however often they take place. And there might be ad hoc requests for actions out of those. For example, diverts or peripheral diverts might be a request that comes out that for us to consider, or the use of an alternative pathway, maybe another. So it's very dynamic in terms of what the ask of us is from a critical incident. In terms of health and well-being of our staff, it's a really good question, VJ. How do we monitor that? Well, we've always got our traditional ways of monitoring that through our absence, how many people we've got off work, and actually our sickness this time compared to last year during Christmas was actually slightly lower than this time last year. Our MSD was higher, but our overall sickness was marginally lower during the year. So you may be able to gauge something from that. But I think it's more, our gauge comes more from the softer intelligence. So we've had, as you know, the welfare vehicles out and about, and Richard and I attended a couple of them over the Christmas period, and that gave us an opportunity to talk to people, and you sort of can gauge the feel you get from staff from that. And in the whole, yes, they were busy, yes, they'd had a difficult time, but on the whole, I think they were okay. They understood the pressures and that were in the system. So I think we have our traditional way of measuring it through hard numbers, I guess, about how many people at work, but also the softer intelligence we were picking up from people who were attending, not just Richard and I, many colleagues, operational and non-operational, went to the welfare vehicles, and the soft intelligence we picked up there helped us sort of gauge the feel for that, if that helps, VJ.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you.
Polly, can I just come back on the question around the military support and the timeliness of this? And I think what's really important now, we have to use all of the intelligence that is available to us to inform our decision making. And as we know, when we brought in fire rescue personnel to support urgent care tier, that was for a specific reason around increasing in demand. But what we have seen is with the latest variant, with the Omicron variant, a real, very clearly a huge widespread community transmission, and that not just impacted on the ambulance sector, but the broader health and social care system. So we were all experiencing staff absences. At the same time, that was ultimately having an impact on things like handover delays, because patients were not getting out of the hospital back into the community. So that became our trigger to proactively take the decision to bring in some additional capacity, because what we don't know right today is what the next few weeks are going to bring us. Now, there is a possibility that we may see some reduction in demand, we may see an improvement in handover delays, but I would rather be in a position where we've taken some additional actions now to ensure that we can get a more timely response out to our patients, rather than getting into the heat of another very difficult situation and then attempting to bring in some more capacity. So that's the timeliness element of it.
Thanks, Richard. And just on the bit of triangulation, colleagues, that I went with a welfare vehicle. I spent an afternoon with a welfare vehicle just after Christmas, just after New Year, actually. And it's absolutely right. The feedback from the staff was tremendous. They really valued the welfare vehicle without doubt. So it was a great initiative. What I picked up from talking to colleagues was that they absolutely appreciated the difficult situation we were all facing and that they were facing, and they were working very hard and very tired. They also acknowledged that because of the high number of medical stand downs, resourcing was a challenge, and that they were having to split up. Quite often crews were having to split up from their usual workmate, because they were having to support another colleague or another station or another vehicle because somebody had gone off short term on medical stand down. So that additional 60 people, feet or bums on seats, for a better way of putting it, I think will be much appreciated in helping to help with the resourcing challenges. I think that will make a big difference. But yeah, it was they were smiling and they really appreciated. Although they were very tired, they really appreciated the trust for introducing the welfare vehicles. We've got Paminda, I think, and then Leon and Will Pope. I'm not sure who +3 is, who's got their hand up.
What for you?
Richard's going to have a look for me while we look at that.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Richard. Ben, thank you for the update on that. And whilst a couple of my questions have already been picked up, going back to the army, I just wanted to understand, Ben, from your perspective, the number 60, why 60? It just, looking at other nationally, there's different numbers that are being broadcast in terms of support that they're getting. So also, you mentioned, and I hope I understood that correctly, that there isn't any kind of clinical or medical skill set that they're coming in with. So it does come in with, just as Pauline alluded to, it's bums on seats. So did we have any optional choice to say that this is the kind of skill set we need, or is it just, it's numbers, it's just, these are what numbers do you want, and this is what you get. So I just wanted to kind of like a bit of understanding on that. And my other question was around, again, the number of calls that we're getting, whether it be category 1 or category 2. Is there any intel or any information you can give that whereby we are having to say to the patient that, look, that this is the delay, this is how long it's going to take for an ambulance to get there, it's better for you to make your own way. So is there anything that we're seeing, or have we got anything in place that where we are making that decision because of the pure delay that it will be to reach out to that patient?
Yep, so I'll start with that question. So absolutely, we do an awful lot of that, hence why we have our incidents. You remember saying we had a significant increase in incidents, but they didn't go into responses, is because through our scripts, through our call takers, we advise them of, we don't tell them exactly how long it's going to be because we can't, but we will advise them it could be up to X hours, and we change that as our pressures grow, and advise the patient, if it's safe to do so, for them to make their own way to hospital. And we also have mechanisms through the EOC where people will also ring them back thereafter, not necessarily the clinical assessment team, but we have a group of staff on light duties ringing back, particularly the 111 calls, advising them of the length that it will be and if they can make their own way. And that absolutely helps us manage that demand. That is something we do every day. It's BAU that for us now. In terms of the military, I'll come to the numbers bit last, but the skill set I think you were asking about, Perminder, we could have, but it makes it a lot more difficult in terms of Leon might come in with more information on this than I can give, but it come with wide skills, and that would have made it very difficult for us to be able to plan them into our workload and plan them in terms of what they could have done for us. With the general duty staff we've got, they are probably the more use, because we can, as I split one of our urgent care tiers up and use them much easier and be more productive with them. And it also meant that we could get the numbers we were looking for quicker as well, in terms of the authorisation from the military for them to come and support us. In terms of the numbers, it is a good question, because David and I talked a lot about David Williams and I talked a lot about what numbers we wanted, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't overcook it. So bringing too many people that we couldn't train, because there's a big reliance on us being able to train these people. We had enough vehicles for them. There actually was enough gaps within our workforce for them to fulfil, because the last thing we wanted to do was bring them in and then not utilise them. That would have been. So what we decided on was we would go almost halfway house, come in with the 60, but ask the military if they could have another 60 ready in the background should we need to implement that quickly. And our current establishment for urgent care tier is 110, I think it might be 110. So in essence, we're halving our urgent care tier by bringing in the military, and we can go to double if we feel we need to. We hope we don't need to do that. So there was a number of factors into our thoughts around what the numbers were going to be, and then we split them. As I said, the 60 is split by proportion in each division. So we haven't overloaded one division. We try to make it proportionate across all the divisions as well.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Ben. Leon.
Yeah, Chairman, you asked about the medical training for the military. All three services, Army, Navy and RAF, all have basic medical training and then sort of battlefield training, which they do every year. With regard to the skill set question, I wasn't going to comment on the numbers, Ben's just done that, but not all military personnel are obviously medical. The Army Medical Services is just a small part of the military, and their medical doctors come from a range of backgrounds without particular pre-hospital ambulance sector experience. So actually to shape the military medics into what we need is challenging. Ben, I think, has gone for a model of getting people with general duties, general skills, with basic first aid that can slot in across our organisation to give us the most bang for our buck. And we really welcome them. And I'll be out tomorrow at Leicester, Nottingham and Lincoln to welcome all the military to the Trust, and looking forward to their enthusiasm and vigour.
Well, if anything like you, Leon, we're going to be very well served. That's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, Will Pope.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pauline. And just building on the discussion that we've had so far, and particularly comments made by yourself and Richard around demand and so on, I wonder if we could have an update. I'm thinking of the extensive discussion there was at the last Workforce Committee meeting around a refreshed demand and capacity review, and we were thinking, okay, short term, but also long term. And I know this may play into the CIP discussion yet to come in a complicated way. But is there any update, Pauline, on the demand and capacity review progress from the exec team?
Thanks, Will. Richard?
Yeah, I think Will Legg has just popped his hand straight up, so I'll let
I missed that, Will Legg.
Will just go in on that point.
Thanks very much. Yeah, so the demand and capacity review work, we've got a group which has been running for a couple of months now, which has got 4 of the different execs on and a load of supporting senior managers as well, just working through the specification. The procurement for those things is actually quite tricky as well, so we're just working through the final points of that. But yeah, all of the input metrics, so all of the things that you would put into doing the modelling have been worked through. We've got a clear understanding of all the things that need to go in. Clearly, we know the kind of output we want from that modelling exercise. It's the kind of thing that we've seen before, because there's some underlying questions that we need answering around what the sustainable future workforce model would need to look like. The only kind of parallel piece of work which informs that modelling, though, is the work around our deployment model. So what staff with what skills, in what kinds of vehicles, etc. Because we're introducing new roles into the front line, we just need to make sure that when we press the button on the modelling, we're fully utilising that new model to make sure that we've got the most efficient, cost-effective model for patient care going forward. So imminent, Will, in terms of starting that process, but anyone who's been in the board a while knows that even when you press the button on doing the modelling, it still takes a couple of months from there in terms of process with the supplier to turn the handle on the machine and get some results out the other end. But yes, it is work in progress, Will.
Thanks, Will. And Mark, you've got a question for us.
Yeah, thank you. Just two quick questions. The first one is about the utilising the military to man ambulances and perform other tasks. Obviously, things are happening at pace around that, but they will be there representing EMAS as a brand almost. I was just wondering, in the training, will there be anything around the values and behaviours that are expected at EMAS? Was my first question.
That's a great question.
Yeah, and the second thing that I wanted to just ask around was, I noted in the national press that EMAS had been quoted around the work we were doing to get the message out about only call 999 if it's in an emergency. And I'm just wondering, from a comms perspective, is that making any difference to people calling in, or is it just there as a nice add-on to have? I just wanted to check that one out as well.
Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. So I think in terms of your first question around the message around values in the training, what we've got today, so all the military are on, all the 60 are together on one army base, getting their introduction from their teams. We're going along to that event today to do a presentation to them. And we will, during that event, talk about our values and what we expect of them while they're working. So yes is the answer to that. And as Leon then alluded to, Leon will be hopefully meeting them tomorrow on when they start the training. And I'll also try get out as well and see some of them when they're in training. So yes, we will push that message around our values and how we work in EMAS. And in terms of comms, that's a difficult one to answer as well. I think what we don't know is how bad it would have been if we hadn't put the message out there. I think that's probably the best way to answer that one. So yeah, you can't really gauge whether we got more or less calls by that. But what we don't know is, you know, if we were silent, what that would have looked like. So I think that's probably the easiest way to say what success or not that has.
Paul, I think in relation to the public communications, there's a real fine line here in that we don't want to discourage those people who desperately need and urgently need kind of urgent or emergency care to contact the 999 or the 111 system. What we try to do is make sure that we're clear on the signposting in that there are alternative services available at different times. We do know, however, that in different parts of the region, different groups and different patients have had access challenges around, be that primary care. And I'm not saying this is generalised everywhere, but there are pockets where it's been challenging. We know, and there are examples where patients are struggling to access their ongoing treatment plan. So therefore, their key care needs are becoming more acute and more prevalent. So, as Ben's quite rightly described, it's very difficult for us to evaluate how many people have reacted to national messaging or local messaging and not contacted the ambulance service. But that we do know every day, we will get examples of where people we feel still will use 999 or 111 inappropriately, and we do have to at times challenge or refer onwards some of those contacts into the EOC.
Thanks, Richard. I think Mel, did you want to come in here?
Thank you. Yes, just to add, I completely agree with Richard and Ben there, but also we have a winter communications plan, Mark. So as part of that, we will be evaluating all of the messages that we've put out via the various channels to see what sort of impact they've had. But I agree, it's absolutely worth doing because it can be quite a complex system for people to navigate. So any signposting or help that we can give them is absolutely important. So yeah, we'll share, perhaps Mark, some of that feedback with you in the evaluation when we've done that.
Great, thank you, Mel. I think that concludes those particular questions. I just got one really, probably for Nicola, before we ask for an update on IPC and COVID. And that was, I mean, the performance around non-conveyance is fantastic, and we should congratulate all our colleagues for delivering that. It's superb and it's sustainable. I just wondered if we've seen any increase in incident reports or complaints from patients or users who have been non-conveyed. Is there any correlation between increased incidents or increased patient dissatisfaction associated with this excellent level of non-conveyance?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Pauline, and that is something that we have, of course, looked at, given that we have seen quite a dramatic reduction in conveyance and are now seeming to sustain at that level. So clearly what we want to do is make sure that what we're doing is safe practice, and really pleased to say that we haven't seen any increase in either patient safety or patient experience measures that would indicate that there has been any adverse impact to doing that. So all the evidence supports that we are doing that in a safe and measured way.
That's excellent. That's really good to hear. Thank you for the assurance, Nicola. Thank you. VJ.
Pauline, just to give you and perhaps other colleagues some assurance. So I've come across 3 families where our paramedics worked extremely hard to keep the patient at home safely, and the level of satisfaction and the assurance they gave to the patient was outstanding, and the families really appreciated them. They felt safe and they felt that they were in good hands, and that was very reassuring. It's anecdotal, but it was the experience of at least 3 families.
Thank you very much, VJ. That's really helpful. And just while we're sharing some congratulations and good news, I had a phone call yesterday from a network colleague of mine who just wanted me to pass on how grateful and appreciative he was of the work that our crews had done with his father, who they had to call 999 twice between Christmas and New Year for his very elderly father, and he was full of praise for the response of the crews and also their professionalism and the compassionate way they dealt with a very elderly, frail gentleman. So it's fantastic when we hear that even though our staff are under such tremendous pressure and working so hard, they still maintain their professionalism and compassion. And that makes me really proud to work with EMAS. It really does. So that's fantastic. I wonder, Richard, if we could just ask Nicola to give us an update on IPC. I know that earlier one of our colleagues asked a question about non-compliance and outbreaks, and I know it's something we're a little concerned about, the non-compliance with IPC standards.
Yes, thank you. I thought it might be helpful to start with a definition of what an outbreak is, because I'll give you the updated outbreak position, and I think it might be quite useful for you to have the context of what constitutes an outbreak. So an outbreak is effectively where you have 2 or more positive cases where you can demonstrate through doing a timeline that those cases have been linked both in time and in place. We also monitor what we call a cluster. And that is similar, but a subtle difference, but an important difference in that it's 2 or more cases where they are linked in place, but actually when we do the timeline, we can't see that there's been any overlap in terms of place with that time with that person. So I think in the report we were at the stage where we had, I think it was between Christmas and New Year, we had 8 outbreaks that we were monitoring at that time. We did expect that the numbers of outbreaks that we monitored would go up in line with the increasing levels of community transmission that we're all seeing, and that has been the case. As of yesterday afternoon, we're actually monitoring 21 outbreaks across our organisation. So that involves A&E, PTS and EOCs. The good news is that those outbreaks are small in nature. So in most instances, they're accounting for between 2 and 4 or 5% of staff in those areas. We have a couple where there's slightly more than that, but they are still manageable at the moment, and we're putting in place all of the appropriate mitigations such as increased cleaning, increased audits against working safely guidance. So those numbers, although it sounds quite shocking that we've got 21 outbreaks, that is not surprising given the size of our organisation, our geographical spread and the background of the rates of community transmission that we have. And also you can't close an outbreak until you've had 28 days clear of your last positive case. So some of those are at day sort of 14, 15 now. So it's not all sort of active at this particular point in time. In addition to that, we're also monitoring 14 clusters. So these are where we have increased numbers in or 2 or more cases in a place, but actually we haven't been able to identify that those cases have been linked in time in any way. We keep an eye on those and we treat them almost exactly the same way as we would as if it was an outbreak, to hopefully prevent it from tipping into that. So we still do the increased cleaning and we still do all of the other measures. In terms of the compliance with PPE, you'll remember that we were getting really concerned about this, and we saw a real drop off of our compliance when the community rules changed and became more relaxed, and it became really difficult for staff not to sort of see that parallel. We had hoped that with the increase in restrictions out of work, that would also flow through into work, and I'm pleased to say that has been the case. We have seen improved compliance in December, and that appears to be continuing into January. I don't think anybody can not be aware of the fact that there is very high transmission of the Omicron variant, and I'm sure that people both inside and outside of work are seeing higher rates of transmission, and I think that is prompting improved practice. In terms of whether any of the outbreaks can be linked to breaches in PPE compliance, I think that's absolutely, that can be the case. I think for me, the area that we still have one of our challenges is in the cab in the DCA. And I think, you know, to be fair to our staff, I think we have to acknowledge that they've now been doing this for 2 years. Wearing a mask all day, every day, is a challenge, and I think we have to continue to be supportive and educational in our approach to addressing that non-compliance, and we take the opportunity obviously to do that when we're managing these outbreaks and clusters. But I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the update, Nicola, much appreciated. Are there any questions for Nicola? Okay, that's great. Are there any outstanding questions from any items on the Chief Executive's report before we close this item on the agenda? No. Nicola.
Sorry, I did just want to give an update on the serious incident position, because obviously we're 10 days into January now, so I just wanted to bring you up to date, because you'll see from the report that we reported 12 serious incidents in December, so one of our highest months. I'm pleased to report that hasn't continued into January. So far in January, we've only reported 1 serious incident. It actually wasn't a delayed response. It was care management concern relating to trauma patients in a road traffic collision. That brings our year-to-date total to 54, 32 of which were delayed responses, and that compares to 38 for the full year last year, of which 22 were delayed responses. So things do seem to have settled down in line with Ben's update on performance. That does seem to be following through in terms of the impact on quality.
Thank you very much, Nicola. Okay, so just to bring this item to conclusion then, we've asked to consider the Chief Executive's report, and I think we've given it a detailed consideration and a good discussion. It's pleasing to note that the increased levels of activity we saw throughout December appear to be settling a little bit in January, and that response time seemed to be slightly improved, and that SI seemed to be not as severe as they were or as frequent as they were during December. And let's hope that continues, because that would be great. And it's also wonderful to have 60 of our Army colleagues joining us, or our military colleagues, not just Army colleagues, joining us from tomorrow. I'm sure they'll make a fantastic difference and will be much appreciated by all our frontline staff, and that we continue to work with our fire and rescue colleagues as well to support frontline services, and we're very grateful to them as well. And also, obviously, to all our frontline colleagues who turn up every day and just get on with it and do a fantastic job. So with that then, I think we'll move straight on, if colleagues are content, to the next part of the agenda. And the next paper for discussion or consideration is the efficiency programme update. Will.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So I'll take the paper in the spirit of the meeting being fairly concise today. I'll take the paper as read, but there was a couple of things I just wanted to put in context, if that's okay, or put some context around it. You'll note in the Chief Executive's report that we've just taken the outline of the planning guidance for 22-23, and I think it's really helpful actually as context for the paper we're about to talk about, because in the planning guidance, it's really clear that there's an expectation of improving urgent emergency care response times, and very clearly about ambulance services and our need to improve our response times to patients. But actually, that comes in a context as well of making effective use of our resources, and the kind of decoding of what that means is making sure we make the money work. So we just need to balance those two things when we have these conversations. Now, one of the reasons we term the efficiency paper rather than the cost improvement paper is because actually trying to get that balance between those two asks of the planning guidance is really challenging, because we're sitting here, we're talking about the military coming into the organisation. It would be incredibly difficult for me to put a proposal to the board today which would say we need to reduce our operational output to be able to meet a cost envelope, given the Omicron response that we've got and given some of those pressures. So actually, the way that we've been tackling the efficiency programme and the way that we've been defining the plans, both this year in 21-22, but also going forward into 22-23, is to have credible schemes which give us the option to either be able to reduce some of our expenditure to be able to release cost and release cash, or to provide additional capacity into our frontline response. And it's actually quite difficult as we sit here in January to nail our colours to the mast one way or the other against each of those schemes. So I think really the context for this paper is about making sure that we've got schemes which are credible. There's a lot of schemes in here which looking to 22-23 are clinically led, so they're looking at clinical improvements with our colleagues on the front line. We've got really good engagement through Leon's team and through Ben's team in terms of those potential changes we want to make. Some of the changes are relatively transactional. Some of them are clinical skills and clinical workflow with patients. So there's a real combination of effort that's going to be going into the 22-23 schemes. I think what's really clear as well is there's been a journey in 21-22 of sorting out some of the basics in EMAS as well. So Ben's operational restructure, leadership restructure with station managers and the kind of the leadership approach that he's got, which is, you know, the final gaps in those rotas and those roles are starting to get filled now. So actually going into 22-23, we've got real confidence in terms of the, I suppose, the managerial leadership element of it. Leon and I are talking about how we best utilise the clinical leadership teams across the divisions to be able to make sure those clinical improvements and the clinically led changes we want to make to release efficiency also work and dovetail with that approach really well. So that's kind of the clinical and the I suppose operational side of things. One other big aspect of the programme going into 22-23 is corporate, of course, and we can't lose sight of the fact that corporate spend in EMAS is a proportion. It's not the majority proportion, obviously. It's a proportion of our spend in EMAS. So it wouldn't be right for us to go through 22-23 without reviewing that and looking at opportunities for cost saving where we can. Colleagues will remember that in 21-22, so previous updates to the board, I talked about the benchmarking exercise, which gives us an opportunity to look to see where opportunities are. Yeah. We've had that we've gone through that process. So we submitted the data. NHSE then gets that from all of the different trusts across the country, not just ambulance services, acute trusts, community trusts, etc. They put it all together and then they give us the report back. And that report which comes back gives us a quartile that we sit in against each of our different services in the organisation, so corporate services in the organisation. So we'll know whether we're in the upper quartile, lower quartile, mid-table, etc., which obviously gives us, doesn't necessarily give us the answers as to what we need to do, but it gives us an opportunity window that we look at and go, right, actually, if there's other services which seem to be doing this with less expenditure or less headcount per 100,000 turnover or per 1,000 employees or whatever the metric is, gives us an opportunity to go and look and at ourselves and see how we're doing things. So we've had that report back. Mike and I both feel that there might be a few anomalies in that return that we've had back. So one of our finance colleagues, Satnam, is working through that at the moment, just making sure that the data quality is absolutely right in the information that we've got back from NHSE. And Satnam's also meeting with all of the other ambulance colleagues who were in charge of putting the return in towards the end of January to look at that consistency, but also look at opportunity as well. And that's where I think things like the Northern Ambulance Alliance potentially play in terms of opportunity and deep dive. But obviously it's a piece of work that through the executive team, each of us as with our director portfolios that we have, we'll be using that information to review our structures, review what we do, and make sure that it's as efficient as it can be given the information that we've had back. So again, not something that I can give a concrete number on today in terms of how much we're going to save, but the plan in terms of the information going through the executive team for review and then coming out the other side with credible plans is there. So I think I'll pause there, Pauline. Happy to take any questions. I can try and answer them. Like I say, we're in that balancing phase at the moment between operational response and cash out and efficiency. So more than happy to answer what I can.
Thanks very much, Will. I think Mike's got his hand up. I'll go straight to Mike before we open it out further. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, Will's perfectly right. It's very complicated, this. The only thing that is fixed, the cash does come out at corporate level. So whether we can take it out at operational level or not is a decision we obviously make, taking into account all the different constraints we've got. But at the end of the day, there will be a sum of money come out of our allocation from the ICS and CDTs to recognise the fact we should make efficiencies. Now, once we know what that amount is, then we've got to play that into our financial plan and then look at what we need to do in terms of our total efficiency requirement, and then how much of that we can or not get out. And Will's right about the corporate costs. There's one or two things there which look a little bit strange, and Satnam is investigating because some look quite big outliers. And so we won't name the IT department as one of them, but it does look rather bizarre when you look at some of the
not true.
I don't think so. We're working through it. The finance department actually shows excellent value for money, by the way. But
that's being reviewed as well.
Yeah, we'll work through that. But I mean, I'm making the point that the money comes out, come what may. So we've got to do a financial plan or operational plan that recognises that and recognises the fact it may take more than 1 year to get ourselves back on track on this. But that's something that Will, I and the rest of the exec team be working on over the next 2-3 months. We've got to be more certainty about what's happening next year.
Mike, just so I'm clear on that, so our income next year will be top sliced to take out the efficiency.
Yes. Now then, what we need to look at
to the value of 6 million.
It could be more than that, because what we don't know is where the ICS is in relation to its target income. So what's happening now is that the NHS, in the terms of Director of Finance, is going on a glide path to its comprehensive spend review target. At the moment, it's about £12 billion above its comprehensive spend review target. So the NHS has got to get down to that target. Now, the impact of that will be different across different ICSs. What we don't know yet is what the impact will be across Derbyshire and our local ICSs.
Okay.
So our target could be above that, Chair, but we won't know that probably till the end of January, beginning of February.
But it's unlikely to be less than that.
Oh, it won't be less than that.
It won't be less than that. So it's a minimum of 6 million.
And then the 6 million, and then we've got to then we look with our ICS colleagues about how we implement that, because they know, as Will said and Ben will agree, there's no point taking £6 million out in resources straight away. We've got to find a way of actually planning that in and taking into account what the additional urgent care targets are, because there may very well be additional investment that we needed for us, and then we can offset additional investment then with any efficiency savings. It's very complicated. you know,
Yeah.
we don't know the answers to it yet, and we won't know for a few weeks yet.
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. VJ.
Thank you very much, Pauline. Will, thanks for the update. As somebody who's newly joined the FPC, it's given me opportunity to engage with this issue a bit more. And forgive me if I'm not quite grasping the complexity of what's in front of us. My sense, however, is that a lot of the paper and, for example, 8 bullet points in terms of the areas we could be looking at the efficiencies, 4 of them, we are in a really difficult and challenging situation at the moment. These were informed by the Deloitte report, which happened 2 years ago. Since then, a lot has changed. We are in a different place altogether, and different kind of pressures. And is it, and I do wonder about the deliverability of some of these schemes now, anytime soon, and perhaps in the way it might have been envisaged at the time. Would it better serve us as an organization if we were to reset our thinking of what is the art of possible now, and what we can actually tangibly show is possible in the next 6 months, 8 months, 9 months. Maybe I'm getting the wrong end of it, but I cannot see how we can progress this with any pace and momentum. And I just wonder whether the informant is kind of history now, and it's slightly irrelevant.
Thank you, VJ. I think it's a really good challenge, actually, because sometimes when you're on a particular path because of a report or because of a particular requirement, you stick to the path because you feel as though it's the the port in a storm which you're trying to hold on to. However, I would say that a lot of the changes and a lot of the efficiencies that we're talking about for 22-23 are clinically led improvements that really we should be doing in the organisation regardless. So actually, these are coming organically from the clinical teams. They're not things where we're trying to ask staff to do things they wouldn't want to do or wouldn't want to improve themselves, and it's capitalising on those as efficiencies. Whether that's time back into delivery of operations or whether that's translated into cash. So actually, these are clinically led improvements, and that's one of the big differences with this efficiency program compared to the cost improvement programs that we've had in the past, where we might have looked at something quite transactionally and said that's a budget that we can take an amount of money out of, and we'll just reset the budget and deliver it that way. This is quite different as a program to that. So I do feel confident that these schemes can be delivered, and because of their clinical nature, that actually they will get airtime with staff and they will want to change in the way that it's being proposed. I will absolutely take the point away though, VJ, in terms of if there are some areas of that original Deloitte's report, which either the environment that we're in now is opportunities which sit outside that, that we can consider. So I do take the point, and I think it's well made, VJ.
Thanks.
I think you might be on mute, Pauline.
Karen, sorry. He's got a chief executive putting the chairman on mute. It's not good. Karen, over to you.
Okay, thanks. First of all, obviously, I wasn't at FPC in December, Will, and so I'm a little bit behind on the update. But I guess from me, when I read the paper, and I'll draw people's attention to page 7 after the chart, the second paragraph. And it says, to date, there are no identified and approved plans to realise the financial savings in the efficiency programme for 22-23. That statement alone really gives me a lot of concerns, because bearing in mind, we've been talking about this for probably 6 months at FPC. It's a challenging time, and it's a challenging time operationally. But I do feel that we've pushed and pushed and pushed on this, and I think for me there's two elements. There's a cost efficiency, the old-fashioned CIP program, and how we deliver those financial savings, and then there's the efficiency program, which is more about the transformation. And I'm just wondering, and bearing in mind what VJ said and made some very valid points there, if it's not time to rethink things and to really approach it in a different and new way, because we are setting ourselves up for a really, really difficult year in 22-23, because we said that in order for these, and it does again reference it in the paper, that we're not going to be ready for April to even start delivering any degree of savings. So for me, the paper just caused me some quite serious concerns. So it was, I summarised it for myself in that we need to make a decision as to how doable is CIP and efficiency, and how hard as a board do we have the appetite to push this and push it harder, because for me there has been no progress in the last 4 to 6 months, and I obviously we've got more turning to red now, so the situation's actually worse. And I'm saying all that, and I feel very uncomfortable saying it, because I also know, and I've listened about all the pressures that are in the system, and I worry about that as well. And so we as a board need to get that balance between driving a real efficiency and cost improvement programme and managing the tensions that are going on, not just in our organisation, but across the workforce. I don't have the answers, but I just welcome the discussion.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Karen.
Paul, and Will,
did you want to come in, Richard?
Yeah. Will, sorry, did you want to make any response to that? If not, I'll just add a comment.
I'll let you have your comment, Richard. I would come back, but you're probably going to say what I'm going to say.
So Pauline may have mentioned in any pre-discussion with the non-exec colleagues that it's very evident we need to get together and have a session, a development session, whatever the right terminology is, to discuss this exact topic, because there are some real wicked problems here, aren't there? In the sense that there are some difficult decisions to take, and in some ways we can make some easy decisions around significant savings. The easy decisions will ultimately mean less resource output. And I give an example there around sort of PAS utilisation. We could absolutely, from month 1 of the new financial year, significantly reduce our PAS expenditure. But in an environment where we know we are not getting to our patients quick enough, and also the hospitals and other. So therefore, I think a separate session discussing this, and hopefully the landscape will be slightly clearer given the contractual implications post the end of January.
Yeah. We could do that, actually. We could schedule that discussion straight after our board meeting in February. We can put an hour aside as a strategic discussion and really work this through, because there has been quite an interesting challenge and a different take on this, because as VJ says, the Deloitte report is history, and we're working through some of that, and some of it is probably still very relevant, but because of COVID and the challenges that we're facing around resourcing, performance and quality, some of those clinical improvements and transformations and efficiencies possibly won't be deliverable next year. They might be deliverable the year after, but we're not going to get full delivery next year. And we need to have a conversation about, if that's the case, what else do we need to do? So I think that would be really good discussion in February.
Yeah, I think also, Paul, it gives an opportunity for some of the refreshed benchmarking data to be shared.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because some of the analysis which was done 2 years plus ago, we are now confident some of the areas where we felt we were an outlier previously, we are no longer an outlier. So I think having that opportunity to for us all to get ourselves into.
Yeah, that would be great if that would be available. Will and then Karen.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. Actually, Richard's just said exactly what I was going to say about benchmarking. So I think if we could have that for the February, support the February proposal, by the way, that would be that would be absolutely great. And also, I don't want to re-say what I said earlier, but I think this plays into the demand and capacity review discussion as well, and the timeliness of that. As I can't remember now whether it was Will or Richard said, you know, this is complex. This is a complex discussion with lots of interrelated and overlapping pressures. So I fully support spending some time in February on that. And from my personal perspective, if an hour is felt not to be enough, very, very supportive of it being more.
Longer. Okay, thank you, Will. Karen.
Yeah, it was just to come back on that point really and say that I welcome that opportunity as well. And just to say that I'm saying this from a personal perspective of wanting to support and work together. It's I don't want anybody to think that it's critical in any way. It's we have a challenge as a board, and I think it's important that the whole board work together on actually looking at potential solutions. So it's just not about being critical. It's just that this is not working and we really need to work together to get something different out there.
Very well summarised. Thank you, Karen. Okay. Any other comments or questions? We're asked to consider the report, and I think, again, we've given it a good consideration, a good discussion, and we've agreed that we'll have a further conversation in February when we've got some more information. We'll look at the benchmarking data and have a look at whether or not we need to have a bit of a reset. So thank you very much for the paper, Will, and for the discussion, colleagues. Thank you. The next item on the agenda then is with Will again, and it's the strategy key performance indicators, which are coming for approval today.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, yeah, this actually was on the follow-up of a trust board action where I was asked to go away and have a look at the Collaborate KPIs once again, just to see if there was any firmer metrics we might be able to include in there and give us some better opportunity. So I've done that. They're included at the very back of this paper. I've included a baseline for each of the different areas where I possibly can, which is either a full year outturn of 2021 or a position at April 21, depending on which was appropriate at the time. There are a couple of indicators where information is in the process of being developed, so data collections, etc., for a couple of the metrics. However, most of them do now have some KPIs in there. The only thing I would say about this process, of course, is whenever we review our strategic objectives, we need to bear in mind there's going to need to be an adjustment to the KPIs or a translation of the KPIs into those strategic objectives, so we can have a level of continuity, because we're not talking about reporting against these on a monthly cycle. We're looking at almost slow burn improvement against a lot of these, and that's how we're measuring them. So we just need to bear that in mind if we approve this today. Finally, the paper recommends that we bring the next report in May 22 to the board, which would give the 21-22 position. So we start to see whether we're making improvements against those KPIs. Happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Will. Just before I hand it over, Will, you know, when we have the paper in May, which will look at whether or not we're making any improvements, will it include targets around those KPIs? Because we've got the baseline, but we haven't yet got the target.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that might need a little bit of development work for us as a board before we get to that May position, because some of these don't have targets against them.
Yeah.
So in terms of national targets or local targets to pull from, so we might need to set our own, which is not a problem. We can do that. But I'm quite happy to facilitate that conversation in a development session before we get there.
Great, thank you, Will. Perminder.
Thank you, Pauline. Thank you, Will. Great to see the baselines on these objectives. I don't want to go through them in terms of, I'm sure there was a lot of dialogue and discussion that happened to get the baselines that we have, but a few of them I was a little bit confused or concerned about. So if I look at, for example, D4, where we will seek to develop a culture where staff well-being is integrated into day-to-day practice, creating a sense of belonging and support. Does your organisation take positive action on health and well-being? And the baseline is 26.2.
Sorry, yes, I should. I should. Yeah. So this percentage figure comes from the staff opinion survey. So it's an annual process run within the NHS across all organisations, which allows us to effectively baseline and compare our organisations year on year in terms of improvement, but also against other trusts as well. So that 26.2% figure is based on the return from our staff opinion survey that staff have told us. So we would look to see an improvement in that figure based on the same question being asked in the staff opinion survey going forward.
Right, so that's where the question that Pauline asked, the target, we would have a target. So that's the piece of work that still needs to happen.
Yeah, so what we might do for that one, just as an example in terms of target, what we might do for that one is say, what does the upper quartile across the country look like for that across all NHS trusts? Because we might have an aim to be in the upper quartile, so we'd set our target to be what the upper quartile figure is. So that's just as an example of where we would be.
Okay, so for us to, as a board, what are we approving exactly here then? So what are we?
The measurements themselves, so the KPI measures, and obviously acknowledging the fact that we have a baseline position against those. Pauline's absolutely right. From May onwards, we need to make sure that we've got an aspiration figure in there. We've got a target figure that we're heading towards. That is a piece of work that it shouldn't take too long in terms of board development discussion, because I can obviously propose what I think the targets should be, and we can go through them on a confirm and challenge basis. I don't think that's going to be particularly onerous.
Thanks, Will. Will Pope and then Kerry.
Thanks, Pauline. Just on that last discussion, because they're probably related in more ways than I would know, I wonder if that discussion about targets that has just been had and Will's suggestion of spending some time together as a board on that, I wonder if we could possibly do that also on the 1st of February, because the two discussions might play together. If we're setting a target which has got a cost associated with it, etc. I wonder if we might be able to in some way cleverly weave those two discussions together.
Yeah, it's a really good point, Will, because you're absolutely right. There are some of these which, if we as a board, if we committed ourselves to a specific improvement around some of these, then to be able to achieve those goals, then yes, I'm sure there would need to be some investment in some of these areas. So let me give that some thought, and I can obviously work through with Pauline as to how that session would run.
Yeah, it might be. What I don't want to happen is the delay about finance beyond February. So I think we need to do that whatever happens. It'd be great if we could do this at the same time, but if not, then we need to do the finance one anyway. Kerry and then Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. The point I wanted to make was that we do need to remember that where we've used staff opinion survey measure as a measure, it is an annual measure, that you will not necessarily get a quarterly update. Whilst there is a national pulse survey that we participate in on a quarterly basis, it doesn't measure absolutely everything that the staff opinion survey measures. So I think we just need to be mindful of that in terms of the quarterly updates that we'd expect.
Thanks, it's a good point, Kerry, thank you. And then Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Will, maybe I might have missed it, so forgive me if I have. I'm just reading through, and I can probably see patient carer feedback referenced twice. Once where it talks about monitoring complaints. I was just wondering if there are any other KPIs that could be added in around what patients think of services at EMAS.
Yeah, it's a good question, Mark, and one which I'd I'd actually been talking to Mel and the comms team about, because historically we've done things like reputational audits, we've done kind of public engagement kind of assessments, those kind of things, and we tend to have done them not on a routine basis but in a periodic basis. So I think it's something which I'm really keen to develop. We need to think about the capacity of our communications team and how we would consider that as part of their overall workload. But yeah, I'm extremely keen to use user feedback, you know, public feedback, public perception, patient feedback as part of this process. And it might actually be one of those questions that we work with our patient voice group over the course of 22-23 to think about how best we could represent that experience of using our services into our board discussions, ultimately through the KPIs. So it might be something for me to pick up with Nicola and patient voice ultimately. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Will. Thank you, colleagues. If there are no further questions or comments, we're asked to approve the revisions to the KPIs for the collaborate section of the strategy and to note the baseline position against all the KPIs. Are we happy to approve that? And also acknowledge that we need to do some work in advance of May to identify target improvements against the KPIs. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. Let's just carry on. The next item is the financial plan for not next year, for the end of this year, for the remainder of this year, which again is coming to us for approval. Mike.
Yeah, thanks. Don't be too optimistic about next year. The way things are going, we may very well roll forward this second half of the year into next year. We don't know yet, but this is the accumulation of the discussion we've had with the former of the ICSs in their shadow form. You remember the first plan that came to the board had us in deficit. We've now agreed the funding with the ICSs. There's enough money in the system to fund our cost pressures. So our top slice has been reduced. We were top sliced, if you recollect, on the basis that Joint Care Derbyshire was a long way from its target. We've run the revised allocation through our model, looked at our existing run rates, and we're okay to the year end. The only variation to run rate we picked up, which material would be the MACA request, but we've got confirmation that's going to be funded centrally. So at the moment, then, as things stand at the moment, we've been balanced at the year end. Slight surplus in the second half of the year to offset the deficit in the first half of the year.
Thank you, Mike. Will Pope.
Thanks, Pauline. And I know I've asked this question before, and when I get the answer, I think I understand it, and then later something prompts me to think, well, maybe I didn't understand it. And Mike has just done the same sort of prompt for me there with his words. Mike, what you said was because of the financial position of Joined Up Care Derbyshire, but why does Joined Up Care Derbyshire's financial position alone put pressure on EMAS when we are a regional resource? And I'm sorry to ask the same question again, and perhaps you can make it clear in my mind one final time.
Oh, well, I think we'll come back to this one many times over the next few months, Will. And it may even come on to capital as well, because the way that the system works is that we, as a regional provider, have got to be within an ICS. And because the Joint Care Derbyshire is the lead ICS, the commissioning, we're in there. It's one of those little anomalies of the new system. It doesn't work. That's fair. That's very clear. And it's completely inequitable. It's complicated to maintain. It makes everything very, very difficult. And when we come on to our discussions about next year's finances, you'll see some that materialise there in February. It just gets ever so complicated. So the rules are, if you're an ICS organisation, you've got to go into one ICS, and that ICS then your INE and your capital is aggregated into the ICS, even though we spread over the whole
So I understand that is the case, but I'm still not convinced. Whose rule book is that? Because I don't think, I might be wrong, Mike, but I don't think that's happening in other regions.
It is. Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay, maybe this is a subject for discussion, Pauline, outside the
because
board
I had the same conversation with other ambulance directors of finance. They're in the same boat now. What makes it a bit problem is that Joined Up Care Derby is one of the ICS which is furthest from its target. So therefore, its savings. We're going back to Will Legg's paper previously. Its savings target is going to be higher. So we will have a higher savings target because we're linked to Joined Up Care Derbyshire. But saying that, most of the ones in the East Midlands are quite distant, so it wouldn't make that much difference if we with anybody else.
Yeah, I think Pauline, Mike's right. Will's correct. We need to have a separate conversation about this item if we can, please.
Yeah, and about how things might change in the future. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So if there are no further questions, then we're asked to approve the revised financial plan. Happy to do that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. And then on the agenda for assurance. What I'm going to suggest is we've got the records of business from each of the subcommittees. We've all read the records of business. Could I just ask the executive leads if there are any updates on the alerts that have been recorded? And can we do Quality and Governance Committee first? Nicola.
Thank you, Pauline. The two alerts from the November and December meeting relate to size and PPE compliance. So I think we've already discussed those under the Chief Exec's report. So nothing else to add. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And then Finance and Performance Committee, Mike, any updates on the alerts?
Well, you had the update from Ben this morning. I've updated the financial plan. So those are the two big items, so nothing to add to that.
Thank you. And then Kerry, any update on the Workforce Committee alerts?
Nothing further to add, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, I've gone through that really quite quickly. Can I just check that colleagues are comfortable with the records of business that have been presented to the board? And that, yeah, okay, brilliant. Thank you. We'll move then straight on to the last section of the agenda, which is the governance section. And the first item is the Treasury Management Report. And I think that is, just bear with me, Mike.
Yes, it is indeed.
It should be Mike, and it is Mike. And again, this is coming for approval.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk much about it. The only thing I show is that I've got very little. I've got no discretion where I invest the money. It goes through the Government Bank of England, so that's the only thing I'd like to bring to attention to the board. The rest of it is just updated policy, and it's per our standard order. It's got to be approved by the board.
Okay. Are there any questions on the Treasury management policy? No. So can we approve it as a board? Yes. Yes. I've seen some nods. Thank you very much. And then the next item then is Karen, and it's the governance report, which again, there are several recommendations which we'll take one at a time. So over to you, Karen. Is there anything you want to pull out?
Thank you, Chairman. There is nothing specific that I wanted to mention. There's a number of different subjects in the report that this month. Obviously happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Karen on the NHS resolution risk pooling scheme first? No. Can we then agree that we should continue to use that pooling scheme for next year, as recommended in the paper? Thank you.
Yes.
Yes. The next one then is the schedule of trust board meetings for next year. Are we happy to approve those? Agree those? Yep. Yeah. Fantastic. The next paper is the revised membership of the Trust Board, which acknowledges Mark Farmer joining us. Are we happy to confirm that revised arrangement? Kerry?
Yes, just wanted to comment, Chair, that Mark's formal placement under the next director scheme will be starting imminently. It hasn't formally started yet, just because we've been concluding all the usual fit and proper persons checks that are required.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so we'll take his month's secondment, his year's placement from the date, that final date.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will confirm that to Karen once it's all concluded.
Thank you. And the next item then, are we the board happy to ratify the urgent decision made by Richard and myself in relation to telephony project?
Yep.
Yep. And finally, are we happy to approve the trust financial standing, sorry, the trust standing orders?
Yep.
Yeah, great, fantastic. Okay, and then last but not least, the board assurance framework. Karen. Anything?
Thank you, Chairman. Again, there's nothing that I wanted to pull out of the report, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Karen? Just before we go to the recommendations in the report, are colleagues comfortable that the risk rating for risk 1 has been reduced, the risk rating for risk 2 has been reduced, and the risk rating for risk 4 has been increased? That's what I've picked up from reading the papers. Yeah, nods, no dissents. Okay. So in light of that then, are we happy to approve the revised board assurance framework of the board? Yeah.
Yes.
Confirm that the BAF identifies the strategic risks? Yeah. And is scored appropriately? Well, we've just confirmed the revised scores, and agree that we have sufficient assurance in relation to the risks included? Yes. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, I think that brings us to the end of the agenda in the meeting in public. So thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. We'll take a break now before we move on to the confidential meeting. So we're slightly over in time. Can I suggest that we take just a few minutes to stretch our legs, get up, have a walk about? I need to, because my back's a bit sore, before we reconvene in the confidential session. So shall we say 11:10 to log back on for confidential? So thank you very much, everybody. Log off, and I'll see you again at 11:10. Thank you.
Thanks, Pauline.